It was a normal night for a worker at the University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore. That is, until it wasn't. In this case, our protagonist is a hospital worker whose name we don't know because she isn't real. Well, at least I don't think she is. Anyway, she works a night shift. You know how sometimes when you're doing a mundane task, you just stare into the abyss for a bit. Yeah, Mito. And apparently she was staring at the door. Why? I'm at the hospital. She says no, she isn't okay. But instead of helping her, he tells her she needs to go home. WTF? Who does this guy work for? The morgue or HR? Because nobody at this hospital seems to care that one of their workers is scared of what she saw. At this point, she's still trying to wrap her head around what just happened. So she calls her mom, who, thankfully, is awake. And she tells her what happened. To be fair, her mother's reaction is much more reasonable than the hospital staff's. And she tells her daughter to call back if anything weird had happened. Then she tells the operator she needs an ambulance and hangs up. I don't blame her. I'd probably do the same thing. But every time she passes the morgue, she hears strange noises coming from inside. Eventually, she can't take it anymore and goes inside. There's no one else around, so she investigates. To her surprise, the door is wide open. When she closes it, though, she swears she feels something grab her leg. But this simple request has apparently set off a chain of events. Primera, ave! But when she looked up from her paperwork, she noticed something strange. The door to the morgue had slammed shut. Now that's weird. She didn't close it, but that doesn't really matter because it's not like anyone else could have possibly gotten in. The morgue is in a locked area of the hospital, and the only other person who had access was there. So clearly the door just closed on its own. No big deal. Just a door being a door. And she is in charge of filing paperwork for the deceased people whose bodies are stored in the hospital. More, this particular night, January of 2017, she was working alone. As far as I know, that's not a big deal. She's done it before and most nights are quiet. So while working, she just kinda zoned out. But things were about to get weirder. The lights flickered and then died, plunging the room into total darkness. Then she heard it. One of the drawers containing the bodies slowly creaked open. Now she's understandably scared, so she does what any reasonable person would do. She grabs a flashlight from somewhere, probably from her car keys, and shines it into the open drawer. What she sees makes her heart stop. There's a body in the drawer. It wasn't there before. Where did it come from? Was it the only one? Was it the one that was in the door? Why did the door open? How did the door open? And why did it close? I don't know about you, but I'd be pretty scared if I saw a dead body in a drawer that was there before. And since her name isn't important, let's call her Jane. Because Jane is a good, hard-working person who doesn't deserve this, especially on her day off. Clearly shaken, she tries to make her way out of the morgue. She feels her way along the wall and finds the exit. Out of the corner of her eye, she thinks she sees something standing in the hallway. but she pushes past it or maybe through it, I don't know, and runs to safety. When she gets to her car, she calls 911. The operator calmly asks her what her location is, and she responds as she sits in her car waiting for help. Supposedly, a security guard walks by and sees her. He asks if she's okay. Finally, an ambulance arrives and she goes home. Vencedores can't sleep. For the next few days, Jane goes back to work because she's a responsible adult.
Listen to this. In 1990, Stockboy was working at a supermarket in Ohio. It was his job to put all the packages of meat into the freezer, but one day he felt something strange. The walk-in freezer was getting colder than usual. At first he thought nothing of it, but then the door to the freezer suddenly slammed shut. He tried to open it but couldn't, so he started screaming for help. His coworkers came running, but by the time they got there, the freezer had already sealed shut. Some people believe that the freezer malfunctioned and the temperature inside the freezer dropped extremely low. They say that there was someone else in the freezer who made that handprint while trying to get out before it was too late. Then stay tuned for more content. But who could that be? Well, some people believe that it was the Stockboy. They say that he had somehow managed to cut himself, and the blood froze almost instantly when he touched the door. However, this doesn't really make sense. If he was trying to get out, why would he cut himself? And if he did cut himself, why didn't he try to get help by making noise instead of waiting 2 hours until someone found him? This caused the air inside the freezer to become very dense. When the freezer door closed, it created a low-pressure environment outside and a high-pressure environment inside. So the air inside the freezer wanted to rush out, but it couldn't. This made the air inside the freezer feel like a solid wall, and that's why the Stockboy couldn't open the door. And whatever he was holding onto for dear life may have slipped out of his grasp, hitting the door and leaving that bloody handprint. They tried everything they could to get in, but it was no use. They needed to call the fire department. They broke the lock and finally pried the door open. But what they saw on the other side was terrifying. After 2 hours of being trapped inside the freezer, the Stockboy was still alive, but just barely. He was unconscious, and his body was covered in ice. They rushed him to the hospital, but he never regained consciousness and died a few days later. That's crazy, but what about that bloody handprint? What does that mean? Well, when they finally got the freezer door open, they noticed something even crazier. On the wall behind where the man was standing was a huge handprint. It was covered in blood. Whoever made that handprint had pushed themselves against the freezer door with all their might. What happened to this poor guy? Well, we may never know for sure. But there are a few theories. But others say that this is just a crazy coincidence. So what do you think happened? Let me know in the comments below. And do you want to hear another scary story? There are certain places where death is just around the corner. You can feel it in the air, sense it in your bones. Hospitals are one of those places. Even if you've never been in a hospital, you can probably tell me what the atmosphere is like. She walked into room number 3 to check on one of her patients. But when she got there, she found the room was empty. The bassinets were neatly made, but the baby was nowhere to be seen. She assumed the baby had been moved to another room, so she went about her business. He suggested turning off the power to the room entirely. As soon as the lights went out, the whispering stopped. Maybe whatever was haunting that room didn't like the dark. But when the lights came back on, the whispering started up again. This time it was louder, more insistent. Rosa, Rosa, Rosa. The security guard was starting to get freaked out. He agreed with the nurses that something weird was going on. He also agreed that he did not want to be a part of it. He left the nurses to deal with the situation, while he went to get help from someone higher up. Shortly after, she heard something strange coming from room 3. They waited, but nothing happened. The baby monitor was behaving like a normal baby monitor, was picking up the sound of the room, the hum of the lights, the squeak of the door. But it wasn't adding anything extra, at least at first. After a few minutes, the nurses went back into the room to check on things. As they were leaving, they heard a small, distinct voice. Rosa. It was so quiet they might have mistaken it for a whisper if they hadn't heard it so clearly. At first she thought it was a radio or maybe some music playing in the room next door. But then she realized it was coming from the baby monitor in the empty room. You'll never guess what this doll is hiding, or check out this video instead. You probably think of beeping machines, white walls, antiseptic smells. Now the nurse knew something was wrong. There hadn't been a baby in that room for 10 years. In fact, the last baby to stay in that room, a little girl named Rosa, died there 10 years earlier. Her parents had made the heartbreaking decision to take her off life support after she was born with severe brain damage. Since then, room 3 was only ever used for storage. The staff jokingly referred to it as the ghost room. Nobody ever spent the night in there, and for good reason. But something else hangs in the air too, something you can't quite put your finger on, a feeling of dread. She found another nurse and told her what was happening. The two of them stood outside the room listening to the whispers. Then they decided to turn off the monitor. Surely that would stop whatever was happening in there. But when they turned the monitor back on, the whispering started up again. They tried turning it off again, but this time, the monitor began emitting a loud, high-pitched noise. The staff gathered in the hallway to try and figure out what to do, but nobody had any answers. Room 3 was clearly not behaving how it should. Hospitals are full of people at their most vulnerable, both the living and the dead, and that makes them ripe for ghost stories. Get ready, because today we're going to be taking a trip to the hospital. Let's do us a favor and subscribe. It only takes a second and really helps out. Thanks. In October of 2014, a nurse working in the neonatal unit of a Texas hospital was getting ready for her shift. The monitor was picking up soft, garbled whispering. It repeated a name over and over again, Rosa, Rosa, Rosa. As soon as the nurse realized what was happening, she ran out of the room to find someone, anyone who could help her. Finally, the hospital's head of security arrived. When he left, the nurses turned off the monitor again. But this time when they turned it back on, there was silence. And whatever was haunting the room was making its presence known, and it wasn't going to stop until someone listened. What would you do if you were a doctor working the night shift at a hospital and you heard the emergency button go off in one of the rooms? Would you investigate or just assume it was a false alarm? For the sake of brevity, let's just call this place Taunton State Hospital. This is a real hospital, by the way, located in Taunton, Massachusetts. It's a forensic hospital, which means it houses some of the most dangerous criminals in the state. People who have committed crimes but also have mental health issues. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever seen a ghost before. Well, one doctor in Massachusetts did investigate, and what he found was absolutely terrifying. After all, it's not funny to mess with someone's life like that. There are two possible explanations for what happened in room 9. Between long shifts, charting, and making sure your patients are well taken care of, it can be tough to keep track of everything. But amidst all the chaos, sometimes the most important thing is charting. The first is that it was a ghost, and the second is that it was an elaborate prank by one of the hospital staff members. All in a comfortable package to hold. The pencil allows me to draw and make markings directly onto the chart, while the 4 ink colors allow me to highlight important information and make notes. The Unijet Stream for AMP. One has thousands of 5-star reviews on Amazon from other medical professionals who love its versatility and comfort. So if you're re-looking for a pen that can make charting a little bit easier and more enjoyable, look no further than the Unijet Stream for AMP. One that SY when the doctor was working his shift and he heard the emergency button go off in room 9, he decided to check it out himself. But now I can just grab my Unijet Stream 4-in-1 pen and be good to go. This pen is so comfortable to hold that I actually look forward to charting now. A good pen can make all the difference when filling out charts, especially during those long shifts. That's why I'm a big fan of the Unijet Stream for AMP. One pen. But we can use this story as a reminder to always be careful when dealing with the unknown. Just because we can't see something doesn't mean it's not there. Thankfully, there's a way to make charting easier and more efficient, and it starts with the right supplies. And just because we can't explain something doesn't mean it's not real. As he walked down the long hallway and got closer to room 9, he began to feel a sense of dread. It all happened back in 2016 when an unnamed physician was working at a hospital that shall remain nameless. As you can imagine, working at such a hospital can be very stressful. The doctor wasn't sure what to make of this, so he called for backup. When his colleagues arrived, they were just as perplexed as he was. No one had been in that room for years, so why did the emergency button go off? And why did the lights turn on and the bedsheets get pulled back? Back in 2009, a nurse working the night shift claimed she saw the ghost of a young girl in one of the hospital's hallways. And in 2015, another nurse saw the apparition of a man in a wheelchair. When he finally reached the room, he was shocked to see that the lights were on. The monitor was beeping and the bed sheets had been pulled back, as if someone had just gotten into bed. But there was no one there. The room had been empty for over 6 years. He wasn't the only one who saw this strange phenomenon either. It's not clear whether or not the hospital has ever addressed these claims, but they make for some interesting stories nonetheless. But back to our story. Some people might say it was just a prank, but it doesn't seem likely that someone would go to such lengths. We'll never know for sure what happened in room 9. If you work in healthcare, then you know how busy and stressful things can get. It's easy to let charting fall by the wayside, but it's crucial to keep accurate records of your patients' conditions and treatments. One of the best ways to streamline your charting process is by using a quality medical pen. This pen has 4 different ink colors and a pencil. I used to carry around a bulky pen pouch with a bunch of different pens and pencils inside, and it's not just me. Welcome to my channel. This is the scariest place where a man discovered a body after hearing these exact words. A toll worker in Florida was working his normal shift when he heard what would become his last words over the intercom. It was around 11 p.m., and most of the traffic had died down. That's when he saw a beat-up old car slowly roll up to his booth. Who was the woman, and why did she do this? Of all things to go out, would it be the thing that could identify the woman? What do you think happened to the woman in the car? What do you think she was trying to do? Let me know down below. And while you're down there, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Maybe even catch her doing whatever it was that she was trying to do. Whether that be robbing the place, or putting something or someone in the trunk, which, let's be honest, seems more likely. For whatever reason, that footage was out, which almost makes us think that she wanted it to be out. Like maybe she planned this whole thing with whoever was in the car with her, and the two of them were trying to frame whoever they put in the trunk. But if that was the case, then why not just put the camera on? Why sit there and risk not getting caught at all? And if she wanted to get caught, why not make it easier for herself and just hold up a sign saying, "Hey, there's a body in your trunk"? Because it seems like she really put a lot of thought into this. Enough thought to plan how she was going to say the line to him, but not enough thought to plan what she was going to do next. Was she trying to rob the toll worker? If so, then why didn't she take anything else from him? She could have taken his wallet, his phone, his keys, could have even taken the money in his till, but she didn't take anything. And if she wasn't trying to rob him, then why tell him that there was someone in his trunk? Why lead him to believe that when he opened it, he would find someone or something in there? It makes no sense. There was only one person inside, a woman. She rolled down her window and handed him a crumpled dollar. But without any evidence, we'll never know what exactly happened or why. Whoever this woman was and whatever it was that she was doing, it's safe to say that she definitely got away with it. The man hesitated for a second, confused by her actions. Then he reached out to take it. She leaned closer to him and said, "He's in your trunk," then quickly rolled back up her window. The man's heart started racing. Who was she talking about? Is this some kind of a joke? What was in the trunk? He didn't have the best imagination, but he knew it couldn't hurt to take a quick peek. So that's exactly what he did. But when he opened the trunk, it was empty. He closed it just as fast, turned around, and that's when he saw her. She was gone. The old car was nowhere to be seen. It's the only evidence that she had ever been there at all was the crumpled dollar still sitting in his hand. He immediately checked the security footage. But unfortunately, it was completely static during the time of the incident. The police were called and they took the dollar with them to try and identify the woman in the car. But after days of investigation, they came back empty-handed. No woman, no car, nothing. It was like she had vanished into thin air. The toll worker went back to his post and tried to get on with his life. But every time a car rolled up to his booth, he looked at the passenger seat, then at the trunk, then at the passenger seat again, half expecting to see a person sitting there who wasn't actually supposed to be there at all. He worked that job for another 2 months before finally quitting. To this day, he still doesn't know what exactly happened, who the woman was, or what she was talking about. But he believes to his core that there was a person in the trunk of his car, even though he never saw anyone. There are so many unanswered questions here. I'm also having a hard time believing that the security footage was out. There are honestly so many possibilities here, but now it's time to hear from you guys. A night shift mechanic in New Jersey was working a midnight shift in his usual spot in the back of the lot when he saw something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It was a cold night, about 10 degrees. And the only light came from the faint beams of his headlamp and the neon open sign above him. He'd been working a truck all night and hadn't seen or heard anything out of the ordinary until now. As he got closer, the man turned and started walking away. The mechanic broke into a jog, and as he got closer, he could see the man's feet. They were bare. As he looked up, he saw a man walking between the parked trucks, still keeping a good distance away. In the dim light, he could see that the man's fingernails were long and dirty. The man opened his mouth to say something, but the mechanic couldn't hear what he said. It sounded like a whisper. The mechanic stopped and called out to him again. The mechanic took a step back, suddenly feeling uneasy. The man didn't move, just kept staring. The man took another step forward, and the mechanic took a step back. He could feel his heart beating in his chest. He could smell the man's rotting teeth and the stench of decay. The man reached out and grabbed the mechanic's shirt. "Hey, what are you doing here? You need some help?" Still no reply. He could feel the man's cold, dead fingers digging into his skin. The man leaned in close and whispered in his ear, "I want to show you something." The man kept coming closer, and the mechanic took a few steps back. The mechanic, still struggling to breathe, watched as the man walked back towards the trailers, tripped over a loose floorboard, and fell to the ground. The mechanic stayed where he was for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. The man was about 5'10", slim build, and he was walking with purpose. But there was something strange about the way he was walking. He quickly got up and brushed himself off. His skin was pale and his eyes were dark and sunken. He was wearing a tattered gray shirt that barely covered his chest, and his feet were bare. The man took a step closer, and the mechanic could see that he was missing a few teeth. Surprised by how calm he felt. There was no fear, no anger, just calmness. He looked at the man who was now standing right in front of him. So he got up from under the truck he was working on and slowly walked towards the back of the lot where he had seen the man disappear. As he rounded the corner of the trailer, he called out, "Hey, are you back there?" His voice echoed in the vast emptiness of the lot. There was no reply. He was walking barefoot. The mechanic watched as the man walked past the rows of trucks, past the tools and the spare tires, and disappeared behind one of the trailers. He wasn't sure why, but something told him to follow. He couldn't see anything in the darkness, but he could just make out the faint outline of a man standing behind the trailer. The man turned and started walking back towards the mechanic. He lay there for a moment, stunned, as the man approached. The man was tall and thin, almost skeletal, with long, greasy hair and a beard. He looked down at his own hands, then back up at the man. He took another step closer. "Can I help you?" The man just kept staring at him. The mechanic looked down at his feet, then back up at the man. He was only about 20 feet away. The man kept coming closer and closer, and the mechanic could feel his breath on his neck. The mechanic screamed and tried to pull away, but the man held on tight. The mechanic struggled to free himself from the man's grip, but the man was too strong, finally pulled away and turned to walk away. He knew he should call the police, but he was too scared. What if the man came back? What if he attacked him again? When he finally got up the courage to follow, he found nothing but steaming footprints in the snow. "Hi, I'm here, and would you look at this?" This case is guaranteed to leave you unsettled. In 2016, a projectionist was working the late-night shift at a theater in Georgia. As the movie he was showing came to an end, the theater was located inside a shopping mall, and the only way to get inside was through the mall itself. Others think he might have snuck in earlier and stayed hidden in one of the storage rooms until the movie started. Let me know your thoughts below. I certainly can't wait to read them. But there are two major problems with this theory. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with a friend. Subscribe and ring the bell icon to stay updated on future videos. First off, the room where the projector was kept was locked. Secondly, the staff said they had counted all the seats before the movie started, and there weren't any empty ones. Security footage from every entrance into the mall was reviewed, but there was no sign of the man. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. The police even checked with the local funeral home to see if someone had brought a body to be cremated, but that wasn't the case. To this day, nobody knows where he came from or where he went. He looked up at the security monitors to check the layout of the theater. The last movie had been packed, but this one was completely different. There were only 5 people scattered throughout the theater. The projectionist knew that when the credits rolled, could sneak out for a quick smoke without anyone getting in or taking their seats. He figured he'd be back before the first viewer even made it to the concession stand. But he decided to check the security cameras anyway. And oh wow, there were suddenly 12 people in the theater. Now, the projectionist didn't think much of it. Maybe they were friends and family who arrived late, he thought. So he went about his business. As the minutes ticked by, though, the number of viewers didn't increase. The projectionist checked again. Still 12 people. He rewound the tape to see if he'd missed something. If maybe they'd arrived earlier or slipped in through an emergency exit, but nothing. There was one person sitting in the center row of seats, and when the footage started, he wasn't there. The projectionist immediately called the police. They arrived and searched the premises, but there was no sign of forced entry, and no one was found. As for the man in the seats, well, he was still there. Apparently, the man had left after the movie ended because when the projectionist turned the lights on, he was gone. The police did question everyone who attended the movie that night, but none of them had seen anything or anyone suspicious. The staff also said that all the doors and windows were locked during the film, and that there were no employees who could have let him in. Even more confusing, how did he get out? Some believe that this man may have somehow phased through the walls, but that's highly unlikely. So what do you think happened? Was this a ghost who was just looking to catch a movie, or was there another explanation? Thanks for watching. There are plenty of scary stories about prisons and what goes on behind those cold, hard steel bars. And sometimes, there are even more chilling tales from the people who work in the facilities. The officer had already clocked in and was doing his routine inventory of supplies. Everything seemed to be fine until he noticed something very strange. There was an extra lunch tray placed at the far end of the cafeteria. At first, he thought maybe an inmate left it there and went to throw it away after they finished eating, but that wasn't the case. This is one such story from a correctional officer from Illinois who was working the day shift in the prison cafeteria. It was an inmate who was serving time for burglary. He had seen him earlier that day helping an elderly inmate get his food. That made sense. He was patiently picking at his nails while looking at the food in front of him. There was no one else in sight. The inmate looked up as if he heard something, but there was no sound. So maybe the inmate brought the meal over to the old guy, and then they both left. Then suddenly he got up and walked away, leaving the meal completely untouched. The correctional officer and his supervisor looked at each other in disbelief. But when they checked the other angle, they saw something that made their blood run cold. Was he talking to someone or something? He was known to be a quiet guy who kept to himself and didn't cause any trouble. Over the next hour, the inmate would go back and forth between his cell and the table. The mystery was never solved, and no one ever found out what really happened that day. Was this guy insane, or was he actually talking to someone else in the room? It didn't make any sense. The inmate went back to his cell and locked the door. The guard knocked, but there was no response. He tried again, but still nothing. Always seemingly talking to someone or something invisible to everyone else. He hadn't said anything to anyone and hadn't spoken a word since. The silence was broken when the supervisor finally spoke up. He started pacing back and forth, then he climbed onto his bunk. In less than a minute, he was back at the table, still staring at the food. "Let's check the cameras in the cells," he said. All the inmates were lined up waiting for their lunch to be served. The only difference was this food was still hot on the monitor. They could see the exact moment when the food was placed on the table. It was 12:02 p.m. For the next few minutes, they watched as the food sat untouched, while the other inmates ate their meals. Then, something else strange happened, but no one had been anywhere near it since. They couldn't see any inmates loitering around the table either, like it had just been taken out of the oven. The officer took a closer look and saw steam rising from the plate. He was confused because no inmate had been near that table for at least 30 minutes. They were all sitting quietly except for one guy who was arguing with a guard about something. But that didn't explain the extra tray. The officer walked over to check it out. It was just another normal day at first. He looked around the room. In the tray was a sandwich, some chips, and a dessert. It was exactly what the other inmates were going to get for lunch. He immediately reported the incident to his supervisor, and together they checked all the security cameras. They decided to keep an eye on the situation. 12:28 p.m., almost exactly 26 minutes after the food was delivered, they saw a figure approach the table. The officer recognized him instantly. The inmate was sitting down at the table, as if he was waiting for someone. For the next 3 minutes, he continued to stare at the food. This was getting weirder by the minute. What was going on? Why was an inmate bringing food to an empty table? Just then, another officer came over to inform them that the inmate had just returned to the cell block. The two men stood in silence for a moment, digesting what they had just seen. As they rushed to the monitors, they saw the inmate sitting in his bed. It was clear he was not mentally well. Whatever he was seeing or talking to, it wasn't there. The correctional officers were stunned. Finally, they decided to send in another guard to check on him. But before they could do anything, after a few minutes, the guard left, and everything went back to normal. Now, have you ever gotten a phone call that you weren't expecting? No, like maybe you were at work or something, and your phone was off, and then it just rings and you pick it up and it's like, hello? And the person on the other line is like, wrong number, sorry, and then hangs up. It happens. It's annoying, but it's not the worst thing that could happen. Probably the worst thing that could happen is when you get a phone call in the middle of the night, but there was no one there. He told his boss that much, and that he was getting freaked out because his boss, upon hearing this, replied, "Okay, then get out of there. Leave the door open. Don't lock it." I mean, you got TA thank the guy who called in the tip if you liked this video. Hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon to enable all notifications so you don't miss any videos. Also, be sure to leave us a comment down below with your thoughts on this case. I'll see you next time. Knew that there was at least one person working in the store, or else how would he have known that his warning would have been heard? Either way, though, we may never know what actually happened that night. Leave the register open and just get out of there. And the attendant did as he was told. He left the store and stayed outside on the phone with his boss, while he waited for the police to arrive. And the person on the other line is whispering urgently into your ear. No sign of forced entry. No sign of a struggle. One about 20 minutes away from where this one took place, and when the police checked the security footage from that station, which makes you wonder, do you think this was a prank, or do you think there really was somebody lurking around the gas station? I personally am inclined to think it was a prank. Because how else would somebody have known that there was a man working alone in the gas station at 2:43 a.m.? How would they have known that there was another man? Presumably just as creeped out by the situation as the attendant hiding behind the counter at the other gas station. Unless they had inside information, it seems unlikely that they would have known these details. They saw a man matching the description of the caller from the previous station enter the store, walk behind the counter and steal some money from the till before running away. No signs of anyone other than the attendant having been in the store. And when the attendant relayed the story to the police, they were understandably skeptical. And that's because this was uninked the first call the police had gotten that night about a gas station attendant being stalked by a mysterious figure. A man working the night shift at a gas station in Springville, Utah got a late-night phone call. There was no one there. In fact, the only thing they saw on the tape was this. They never caught the man who called the attendant and warned him that somebody was behind him. They never caught the man who stole money from the other gas station either. So he asked the man on the phone, "Who is this?" It was the gas station number. And on the other line was the voice of his boss. His boss said, "Get out of there right now. Get out of the store. Run." The attendant, understandably confused at this point, asked his boss what was going on, why he was telling him to leave. And his boss replied, "There's someone behind you. Can't tell you who it is or what it looks like, but get out of there now." And the man responded frantically, "You have to run. He's almost on top of you. I barely got away." And with that, the line went dead. It was 2:43 a.m., and the man on the line was whispering urgently, "He's behind you. He's behind you, man. He's coming for you." According to the attendant, he could hear the man breathing heavily on the other line, almost as if the man was out of breath, running, trying to catch his breath. But the attendant couldn't make out who it was on the other line. His voice was too distorted. That there is somebody behind you and then you turn around and there is nobody there. Well, that's exactly what happened to a gas station attendant in Utah. He figured he'd gotten a prank call, and that was it. He probably should have just left it alone, but he didn't. About 15 minutes after the initial call, the phone rang again. But the story gets a little weirder. So let me go ahead and explain. Our story begins in the early morning hours of April 1996. So the attendant, being understandably creeped out by this point, turned to look behind him. Obviously shaken at this point, the attendant hung up the phone and figured that was the end of it. And when he picked it up, the attendant recognized the number. So again, the attendant turned around to look behind him. When they arrived, though, they found nothing. They had gotten a near-identical call about a different gas station. But when they checked the Springville station's security footage, they saw no such man. As far as the police were concerned, it was likely an elaborate prank. It could have been a coincidence, sure, but the odds of that happening are slim. Thanks for watching. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is another paranormal short. This comes from a Reddit user. I wanted to make sure that if anyone came in that I could get them seated right away. One night I was closing down the restaurant, resetting the floor, and wiping down tables and chairs for the night shift on the servers, and I knew that he had probably put the pancakes out there to try and scare me. I smiled and decided to play along. I went back into the kitchen to check on the pancakes, but they were gone. The cook was still eating his dinner, and he acted like he was uneven listening when I asked him if he took the plate of pancakes out. At this point, I was starting to feel a little uneasy. I went out to the dining room and checked the surveillance video. On the screen, I watched as the plate of pancakes materialized out of thin air. The clock on the wall said 3:31 a.m. There was no one in the restaurant or in the hallway. I checked all the angles, and none of them showed anyone entering the restaurant or placing the plate of pancakes down. I walked out to the dining room and looked around to make sure that no one was watching. Then I proceeded to dramatically scream, "Who's there?" in a spooky voice. I waited a beat and then screamed again, "Who's there?" I was trying to be scary, but I ended up just sounding like a fool. It was about 3:30 in the morning, and I had just finished mopping the floor. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to show your support if you liked the video. When I turned around and saw a full plate of pancakes sitting in the last booth steaming, I was not expecting anyone to be coming in at this time in the morning, and no one had come through the front door. All the customers had left. And the only other employee working was the cook, who was sitting in the back eating his dinner. I was a server at a 24-hour diner in Kentucky. The diner was an old-fashioned style place with red vinyl booths, a countertop with stools, and a counter and table service. It was also open 24 hours. Behind the diner was an old motel that we would jokingly say was haunted because of all the strange things that happened there. Every time maintenance would go into the walls to fix something, they would come out covered in what looked like blood or paint. And the cleaning lady once called the police on us, because she saw the ghost of an old woman in the room next to the office. So if you're scared of ghosts, then click away now. Our next story is about a haunted restaurant. I decided that the best thing to do was to take the plate into the kitchen so the cook could put them on the heat lamp. As I walked into the kitchen, I asked him if he had put the pancakes there, and he responded, "What?" He looked genuinely confused and said, "No, those weren't mine." I told him that I found the plate of food out in the dining room, and I asked if he could put them in the heat lamp until whoever ordered them came back to pick them up. He looked at me for a moment and then went back to eating his dinner. There were 8 booths in the restaurant, and I always made sure to keep the last one clean, since it was the best booth. I walked over to the table and stared at the plate of food for a moment. Okay. At this point, I should mention that the cook was known for playing jokes after a few minutes of waiting. I don't know what else to tell you. I wish I could explain what happened that night. I'm still curious and creeped out about it. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is going to be about a mysterious message from a toll booth that left a man terrified. He was working at his toll booth in Florida when suddenly a car pulled up. The driver handed him a crumpled dollar and said, "He's in your trunk." He decided to check the security footage to see if it had captured anything. But what he saw on the tapes only served to deepen the mystery. During the entire exchange, the camera had inexplicably been showing static. Before he could even react, the woman had already driven off. She sped away from the booth and disappeared from sight. It was just an ordinary day for the toll worker. According to them, she was known to frequent the area and had even been involved in other similar incidents. With the help of the authorities, they tracked down the woman who had interacted with the toll worker. The toll worker cautiously approached the trunk of his car. But what he found there only added to his bewilderment. It was empty. They couldn't find any evidence to support a more sinister motive, so the case was effectively closed. The experience shook him to his core, and he couldn't help but feel that justice hadn't been served. It was a chilling tale that highlighted the darker aspects of human behavior and the unnerving mysteries that sometimes go unsolved. Claiming that she had only wanted to test the toll worker's reaction, she downplayed her actions, stating that she had never intended to harm anyone. However, the toll worker wasn't convinced. He felt that there was more to the story than what was being revealed. Had the woman perhaps made a mistake? Was someone really in his trunk? Or was this some kind of sick joke? Confused and a little unnerved by her cryptic message, the memory of the incident, the eerie message, and the blank footage from the security camera kept him on edge. He started to wonder if he should have done something more, if there was some action he could take now to rectify the situation. As he grappled with these questions, who was the woman, and what had she meant by her cryptic message? Why was the security footage blank during the crucial moment? Most importantly, was there actually someone in the trunk of the car? This bizarre incident left many unanswered questions in its wake. As days turned into weeks, the toll worker couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. Determined to get to the bottom of this mystery, he decided to go public with his story. He reached out to local media outlets, hoping that someone somewhere might have some answers for him. He described in detail what had happened, the exact words the woman had spoken, and the unsettling implications of the blank security footage. His story quickly gained traction, not just because of the strange circumstances, but also because it raised questions about the safety and security measures at the toll plaza. People began to share their thoughts, some suggesting possible motives behind the woman's actions, while others were quick to point out the potential danger of such a prank. Amidst the flurry of comments and theories, one particular detail stood out. Someone had recognized the woman from the toll booth camera. With this new lead, the toll worker felt a surge of hope. Finally, there was something concrete to go on. When questioned, she denied any wrongdoing despite this. The authorities seemed satisfied with the woman's explanation and decided to let the matter rest. But for the toll worker, the ordeal had a profound impact. He continued to question the woman's motives, wondering if she had truly acted alone. The mystery of the woman's intentions remained. The blank security footage served as a constant reminder of the unsettling incident.